Racing Update is brought to you by Bet365, the world's favourite online betting brand.
Imagine what you could be buying instead.
It's exciting. Everest winner Giga Kick is back racing today in the McEwen in Melbourne. He's one of a number of wonderful horses who returned to the track today. Daily Telegraph journalist Shayne O'Cass joins us from the newsroom. Morning, Shayne. Giga Kick, this is exciting.
Well, it sure is, Tim. This is the first time Giga Kick's going to have a run at Moonee Valley. It's not a track that should worry him. It's not the easiest track to race at, but look, this is just for him to kick off, to get back into Sydney for his Everest defence. And from all reports, the horse is going exceedingly well. So, look, hopefully he comes through it safe and sound, and if he wins, all the better.
Some very exciting horses returning to racing today, both in Sydney and Melbourne.
Well, there are. In Sydney, we've got the Run to the Rose, which is going to concentrate most of the action on the Golden Rose, which is coming up quite soon. There's a number of horses in the Shirako Stakes for the fillies and mares that could have an impact on the Everest. For example, there's Zapateo, one of the Godolphin horses, and there's also a filly called I Am Me, who's one of the dynamic syndication mares. Now, the interesting thing about her, Tim, she once ran 107.7 at Randwick for 1200. Now, Yes ran the course record there when he won the Everest, which was about 107.32. So she's getting into that time where she could potentially put herself in the top three or even win an Everest. So it'll be very interesting to see what she does today, because the field is a long way from being set. We only have 4 confirmed runners, as you well know. There are 8 spots still available. Some of those are probably behind the scenes, maybe getting closer to being stitched up now that we lost Nature Strip and Eduardo out of the race. But look, a lot of horses racing today could make a late charge for the Everest, and then of course an even later charge next week when we see the short stakes, which is pretty much the last stop for Everest horses.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? If we look at Michael Kent Jr., who's coming up on the show a little later, and Mick Price, they have formed a dynamic duo in training. They've got Globe, this exciting horse, returning today, and another horse which could be really in the lens for those looking at an Everest runner, What You Need. He returns next week, a stallion.
Well, yeah, he's an interesting horse. It's funny that the Kents and Mick Price have 2 unbeaten horses at the moment, and they're 2 of the potential massive spring stars. I mean, you mentioned Globe. He's won 4 out of 4, and I think he's won by a combined total of 14 lengths. Now, this is a big test for him today. He's in the Fian. But the other horse that you mentioned there, What You Need, he's a son of Serpeto, who's also the sire of Buenos Noches, he's an Everest horse, in my opinion. So What You Need is going to race in a couple of weeks' time, as you mentioned. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if he makes it into the field, because we've had a complete changing of the guard from last year. I think we're only going to have maybe 2 horses from last year's Everest make it through to this year's Everest, with so many retirees and just other horses coming onto the scene. So look, there's a lot riding on what these animals are going to be doing in the next few weeks, and they really don't want to put a foot wrong, because their slot holders need to be impressed, because there's a big lure for them in a couple of weeks' time.
Oh yeah, $20 million race these days, and we've got Max Whitby coming up on the show shortly, and Max is yet to decide. Masked Crusader came second for Max and Neil Werrett a couple of years ago. He retired overnight. You mentioned Nature Strip, you mentioned Eduardo. It really is a changing of the guard, and these 3 have been great servants to this industry.
Well, they have. It's odd that they would all retire at the same time, particularly on the same day. But I suppose it was fitting that Nature Strip and Eduardo did retire on the same day out of the same race, because they did meet each other 13 times. I think it was 8-5 to Nature Strip. But Nature Strip is probably the one that everyone will remember. He is the second highest prize money earner of all time, only behind Winks, a stablemate. He only had 1 more start than Winks. He won 9 Group 1s, throwing the Everest. At Royal Ascot, of course, he won there. That's probably the 2 races that he'll be remembered for. But to win 3 TJs, it was just incredible. Chris Waller did an amazing job with the horse to keep him going through all those years. And even though he wasn't unbeaten, and he was never really unbeatable, there were times when Nature Strip was, well, for a long time, he was the #1 ranked sprinter in the world, which is quite incredible. So he was a fantastic horse. He was much beloved by punters. Interesting that only won 50% of his starts, and I say only, but look, he raced at the highest level throughout his whole career, and look, he was a much loved horse in the general public, not just in Sydney, but all around Australia, and we'll miss him.
almost all around the world. What a mighty horse. And a good win by Remark. We will talk to Max about that. I'll ask Max about Remark because I know John Massawa was very happy with that win last week. You got a quick tip for us at odds? Shayne's Ruffy?
I do. Last week we didn't do too well, but this week I'm another Chris Waller fan. Ashfall. It's in the race today. The run to the Rose. It's $11. Jay Ford, takeover targets jockey. Look out for a big run from Ashfall.
Ashfall?
Ashfall, that's the one.
In the run to the Rose. All right, we'll do it all again next week. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Tim.
This racing update is brought to you by Bet365, the world's favourite online betting brand.
What are you really gambling with?